Eternal Strands is coming to Game Pass on day one. It is a fantastic debut for Yellow Brick Games. Part Zelda, part Monster Hunter, it is a physics and thermophysics-powered action title. You are the Point, going on expeditions to lead your band of weavers, aka magic users, into long-lost lands. To do so, you will fling, set on fire, and freeze your enemies as you hack, slash, and climb your way across 24+ hours of gameplay. I fear this new IP from a new developer will get lost in the crush that is 2025's early release slate. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of why I think Eternal Strands is well worth checking out in this XboxEra review. The game begins with your character Bryn joining a band of travelers heading to the Vale. It's a deadly magical protection field covering the area that weavers used to call home. After some shenanigans, you end up inside this magical dome and settle in a home base in its former capital city. Throughout the game, there are politics, delicate friendships to balance, and a lot of visual novel-style dialogue-heavy cutscenes in Eternal Strands. You can skip all of it if your inner Nick has to come out, but I found the story engaging to make sure I at least read everything. The voice acting is solid, with writing that felt natural enough while trying to build up this whole new world and mythos surrounding everything. While you can make some dialogue choices, the game makes it clear that they only add in different flavors. The events stay the same no matter what you choose in the end. Quests tend to stick to the tried and true fetch variety, with Bryn heading out to areas over and over again to find items for her companions. This is also the main leveling mechanic in the game as well. Eternal Strands' gameplay loop sees you heading out to zones attempting to unlock the various teleport hubs early on. Once you've got that loop set up, you'll then unlock the ability to teleport back base whenever you want. There's a short casting time on that to keep it from being easily spammed. The only penalty for death as well is losing all but a few of the items that you have collected on your current trip. The game has a day-night cycle with days being countered over time. I was at day 23 when I had credits roll. I don't think it really ties into the story in any way, it's just another stat to keep track of for funsies. There are a handful of different items to collect with which you will craft your gear. This is the main leveling system, as the higher tiered items create way more powerful and protective gear. Which, of course, like all modern games, uses a colored rarity system in its UI to let you know how powerful something is by default, matched with a star rating system. By the end of my run, the same weapon that had been 30 or 40 damage ended up around 150. And this is no Diablo, that 100 or so power increase meant a lot when it came to tackling both regular enemies and bosses. You will also need to keep your armor and resistance numbers rising as well. Your gear slots for weaponry are sword and shield, bow, and two-hander. For armor, you've got a helm, a chest, gauntlets, and greaves. To craft each, you'll need to find the various recipes in each zone. Once you have those recipes, you'll use a mix of types of ingredients, which include tanned, forged, carved, and woven. Each type can be found in expeditions as you break rocks and trees, kill animals, and defeat bosses. The types of items you get and their rarity is influenced by something being either frozen or set on fire. Burn a doggo to death and you'll get better quality leather, but no fur. Freeze that doggy and your chances of getting rare fur skyrocket, etc. It's a really fun system that seems a little overwhelming at first, but it's really simple once you see that everything's sort of slotted into a category. In both combat and exploration, magic is a major focus for Eternal Strands, and your trips out into the wilds will see you facing 3 kinds of it. You got your fire, your ice, and your miasma. First two, exactly what you'd think, heat and cold, but miasma is raw magic that is deadly to anything that touches it for too long. Your character wears a mantle, which allows you to weave magic through strands of energy. Said strands are harvested from the major enemies in each zone. There's one active at a time, and they are changing depending on what day in a seeming random pattern once you've defeated them for the very first time. There are 9 strands/powers in total, with Bryn knowing only 2 at the start. You can level each of them up to 3 tiers of strength, and they are pretty much the star of the game. The first time you defeat either the giant arc or regular creature bosses, you will get their strand. Every subsequent kill will have a different way to harvest upgrades for it. How to harvest can be figured out via your codex, and helped keeps the gameplay fresh way longer than it would have been otherwise. Tossing rocks, setting the ground on fire, and donning magical ice armor is a lot of fun, but the enemy variety is not that high. Thankfully, the base movement and combat are solid enough to keep things fun for pretty much the entire playthrough. The physics and the kinetic and the thermo part of Eternal Strands are supported by a climb absolutely anywhere traversal system. Bryn must be part Spider-Man, because she can stick to walls and climb with more stamina than even Link could ever dream of. Early on, the game is pretty flat as the focus is on teaching you combat and magic. Once you reach the city areas, it becomes an urban playground of platforming. X is your basic swing, Y interacts with objects and starts your climbing, B is an iframes full dodge, and A is for jumping. It's really fun to learn everything on your own, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but just know it works off of a pretty generous stamina meter. If you use it all, Bryn then needs herself a memento to catch her breath, then you get it all back. Stamina is also key for boss encounters, where you end up going full-on Dragon's Dogma, Shadow of the Colossus style, climbing on your foes to hit them in key areas. Each of your 3 weapons has a magically imbued attack on the right trigger. What type depends on what you've crafted, but they'll always be either kinetic, fire, or ice-based. Bryn always has access to the sword and shield, bow and two-hander once you've made at least one of them. With the fire and ice system, I found having one weapon be fire and one be ice worked really well until I unlocked enough magical abilities to have each covered without worry. Eternal Strands is a physics and thermophysics sandbox action game. Using your powers to fling the environment at enemies never grows old. As you upgrade each ability, you feel that power ramping up, and it's really satisfying. Base enemies never really become stronger, though there are more powerful variants that show up as you progress through the main campaign. There are 9 great foes who are the bosses mentioned earlier. While it's not some massive Monster Hunter amount, it's the first game in a brand new IP. I think overall the variety of locations, weapons, and enemy types is pretty damned good, though it did wear thin in the very end of the game for me. Eternal Strands runs on the Unreal Engine. It both looked and ran damned well on my Xbox Series X and PC. This is a Game Pass/Play Anywhere title, letting you jump between console and computer without issue. I primarily played on Xbox early on, switching to my PC later because it was just really damn smooth at 120 FPS. Xbox doesn't have any graphical modes. It opts instead to focus on a 60 FPS target that I never really noticed it dipping from. The title goes for a more painterly, stylized look in its gameplay. Cutscenes are mostly visual novel-style character drawings, with the occasional 3D rendered cutscene mixed in, and the really important ones are fully animated with a basic but visually arresting style. And during the game, there's a lot going on with the physics and flames and ice changing the environment constantly. It never chugged, nor did the physics break on me at any point. It's a pretty big accomplishment to have all of this background math going on for the temperature and density of items. It's being constantly calculated without any major performance issues or bugs. Eternal Strands is the type of title visually that I think will stand the test of time. It never looks cheap, nor does it look overly expensive. Instead, you see a vision of what the creators wanted pretty well realized. It's visually cohesive, with a UI that never gets in the way or is too busy. The action on screen has enough going on that it helps to never feel inundated with extraneous info for the sake of just making things look pretty. Music and voice acting are, for me, 2 of the most important things of any game. And while the latter can be ignored if you're the type to skip every cutscene, the former can't. Music just sets the mood, and Austin Wintory's soundtrack is a perfect complement to the on-screen action. Whether it's a touching cutscene or a bombastic boss fight, the music helps to enhance the emotional stakes. And if, like me, story matters for you in games, then I'm happy to say the English voice cast is really good. While some plot lines do feel a little rushed, I also never got the sense that a line was being phoned in or anything. Each performance matches the look and feel of its interesting on-screen counterparts. a little bit of a furry game. Bug-wise, it was pretty damn perfect for me on console. It had one crash, but on PC, I had a really weird bug that the devs hadn't heard of. It might just be my version of Windows, because when I played the game on desktop, I could not get it to read a controller. But if I played it on my Lenovo Legion Go, it read the controller on that, no problem. Not sure what it is. You guys may never see it, especially since you're getting a day one patch, but that was the one main thing I ran into. And in the end, I think my only issue with the game, Eternal Strands, was that I found it a little too long. I beat it in roughly 26 hours, with the majority of the latter third being very constant short trips to go fetch items. If a little bit of that had been lopped off, I think the pacing would have kept up better for me, though I did spend a lot of time farming up things to be stronger earlier on, so your mileage may vary. Wrapping things up, I think Eternal Strands is a fantastic first title from Yellow Brick Games. It's an IP I hope to see more of in the future, as its excellent gameplay felt like a breath of fresh air for the genre. It's also out day one on Game Pass, and even in this bloated as hell 2025 release schedule, I wholeheartedly recommend checking it out, no matter where you play.